I think you guys would like this more. I would like to go over this Valorant video, but I feel like the only person here in this room is going to like it is me.
Protests were overwhelmingly peaceful. Over 96% of them had no property damage at all. Even more had no reported injuries. But Republicans in high places told a different story, with plenty of name-calling.
We have Antifa, we have anarchists, we have terrorists, we have looters.
I hope state and local authorities will work quickly to crack down on outside agitators and domestic terrorists.
Let's see how these anarchists respond when the
These
101st Airborne is on the other side of the street.
1 year on, some GOP lawmakers have
Yeah, they just want to mow down these terrorists, dude. These anarchists.
a new tactic for handling protests by
I
making
wonder how
parts
they
of
feel
them
when the
a
airborne will
crime.
be on the other side. These fucking children
In just
with shields.
2021, GOP lawmakers in 32 states have
Antifa,
introduced
yep.
over 80 anti-protest bills. The bills vary
This is what I was
in
talking
approach
about
and
earlier,
in just
by the
how
way.
much they chip away at the First Amendment.
Is that these are the things, and why I also want to get more. I'm curious about how to do it, but to cover more local politics, as well as my own, but also places that I know and care about. But I want to do it for more places, and obviously, though, that gets very hard. That's a lot of places to cover, but that's why the other important thing to say is watch out for your local politics, because this is stuff that's been going on. I've talked about before about how a lot of these bills have been passing with talking about right-wing extremism as an example, but we know that's not who it's going to be used on, you know?
Most propose new or harsher penalties. A bill in Alabama could give up to 10 years in prison for inciting a riot. But the language is so broad, it could be a
By the way, you streamed a video last time with a guy talking about the trans bill, and at the end had the suicide hotline. Who was that? I don't remember this. It might have been Zero. I don't know. I feel like I don't remember this conversation, Moonbat. I might be wrong though.
applied to someone who handed out water to protesters. One in Minnesota would make it so anyone convicted of illegal conduct
No,
at
I
a
definitely
demonstration
noticed you, Moonbat, and how you feel about
would be
local
unable
politics.
to get food assistance, unemployment, or student loans. Some target protests that block traffic. A bill in Oklahoma would make willfully blocking a street punishable by up to 2 years in prison. A few address different types of protests. 5 states have proposed limiting demonstrations at oil pipelines. Others aim to protect police, or at least their feelings. A bill in Ohio could make it a crime to taunt a cop.
Yeah, I remember hearing
A
about
couple
this
go
one.
after elected officials.
It's so pathetic.
One in North Carolina could give a mayor up to 30 days in jail for publicly encouraging cops to respect the rights of protesters. And then there are the bills in 11 states, trying to give immunity to motorists who run over protesters, as long as the driver was exercising, quote, due care. Now, in most cases, lawmakers introducing these bills justify them by saying they're meant to discourage violence and property damage, things that are already illegal and already enforced. So whatever some Republicans say, these bills are aimed at discouraging protesters and discrediting their cause by turning them into criminals. And that tactic has been around for a while.
For most of the 20th century, riots were perpetuated by white vigilante mobs against Black communities. Wilmington in 1898, Springfield in 1908, East St. Louis in 1917, Tulsa in 1921. But they didn't compel the kind of police response did the so-called riots of the 1960s, which were seen as fundamentally Black. And this is when we really begin to see the close linkages between this idea of rioting and criminality. In Harlem in 1964, the New York Police Department killed a 15-year-old Black resident. This led to what's called riot in American cities. But the grievances that the participants in that rebellion were calling for were justice, were for jobs, were for better educational opportunities, were for decent housing and full inclusion in American society. These incidents defined every summer of Lyndon Johnson's presidency and beyond. The response was not to say, okay, let's contend with these demands, but was to say, no, this is not civil rights protest. This is criminal. These are hoodlums. These are lawbreakers. So, whether nonviolent or violent protests, the response to demands for socioeconomic equality and racial equality in the US takes the form of policing and takes the form of arresting people and jailing them.
Many of these bills won't pass, but at least 6 have, including one in Florida that kind of does it all. But all of these bills, whether they pass or not, are about messaging, showing the conservative base which side you're on. That instead of listening to protesters, you've declared war.
Yeah, no, the Florida bill is insane. No, the Florida bill, yeah, no, these are an issue all over right now. And this is something that Republicans and Democrats will agree on, is extending this aspect of what they would call the nanny state, right? Or anything like that, where they use this fear of what happened over this last summer as a way to say that there needs to be more limitations on freedom of speech. This is what Republicans talk about, but actually the problem. And Democrats engage in this, and Republicans, especially more conservative Democrats. Are they really the unmarked vans and feds and PDX? Like, we heard a lot about that during Trump era, and if that's still the case, that's a major issue. That was insane, by the way, the shit that was happening there with the unmarked vans.